Welcome back, everyone. My name is Emily Doolittle, and we're going to turn now to a discussion with some teachers and school counselors who have watched the MasterClass on insights into children's temperament. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that children might be facing as they are transitioning through this incredibly challenging time of the pandemic, and as teachers and principals and school administrators are trying to navigate this really strange world we're living in, where instruction's happening online and some people are hybrid, and really hopefully by the fall, children will be back in classrooms. So I wanted to start by throwing a question out to the group. And Sandy G, I will put you on the spot to start us off if that's okay. And I guess if maybe I could hear a little bit from all of you on what are you anticipating as being some of the biggest mental health challenges that your younger students, like your kindergartners, first graders, second graders, the kinds of things they're going to really be dealing with as they potentially face entering a classroom in person for the first time, or maybe after a very long period of time. So Sandy, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So there's been so much uncertainty for young kids, and there have been a lot of increases in mental illness in kids from young kids through adolescence. So we know that our young kids are experiencing anxiety, rates of depression have increased. Some of the things they experience are associated with difficulty concentrating in the classroom. The anxiety that kids experience also impact their sleep. And we know that young children without sleep can have difficulty focusing, managing behaviors, regulating their emotions. They're scared and worried, some of them. And having said that, a lot of kids are going to be just fine. I don't want to just focus on the challenge, the kids with challenges. A lot of kids, they're resilient and they'll be fine. But I think that we can expect a lot of kids to come back who are afraid to separate from their parents. They've been with them. Some of them may have experienced the trauma of a loss of a family member because of COVID. So I think they're going to have a lot of challenges.
Okay, so Sandy, you've made so many good points here and raised so many issues, but actually this is the perfect opportunity to turn this over to Sandy McClowry, the developer of Insights, because you have just noted something very important. There will be a range of needs for children coming back to the classroom. Some will be fine, others will find it more challenging, and the challenges will be really different depending upon the child. So Dr. McClowry, could you please tell us a little bit about Insights? Because I think there are many, what I know about Insights from working with you over the past decade or so, that this is sort of like exactly what Insights is all about. So tell us more.
So Insights focuses on children's social emotional learning. And it's hard to practice your social and emotional skills when you're home alone without classmates. So this is going to be a time when the kids are back in school and are going to start interacting with friends as opposed to parents and siblings. We just saw about the dilemmas, and I was working with a child on dilemmas a couple of weeks ago, a second grader, and she said to me, wait, Dr. McClary, are these old videos? And I thought, yeah. And she said, are they older than 2019? And I said, yeah. And she said, the puppets are not social distancing and they're not wearing masks. And when you think about how the kids have been conditioned, and now if they're going to be in classrooms and going to be able to interact, that conditioning of I can't be with my friends, I can't touch, all of those things are activities that teachers are going to have to deal with. But fortunately, I think Insights is very flexible, and Phil and Eileen can probably answer more to that, so that whatever the dilemmas are, we'll be able to deal with them with the kids and the teachers.
Thank you, Sandy. So Phil, since your name was called out, maybe I will turn it to you to respond to what Sandy just said, but then I also have a follow-up question for you.
Okay, you said you had a follow-up question for me?
Well, so if you could talk a little bit more about sort of some of those things that Sandy was describing, sort of like how, students haven't had those opportunities, during this past several months, over a year now, and sort of what how you are thinking about how you'll work with your students as they're kind of making that transition back, where maybe they've, really been kind of isolated, right?
Right. Okay, so many of the videos, they have dilemmas where students are working with each other. So because of the pandemic, we know that, that has been almost eliminated. So I'm thinking maybe when the kids get back to probably, like Sandy mentioned, to definitely make it more flexible with having them like, listen, guys, I know we're coming out of the pandemic and, you're so used to and conditioned into, hey, 6 feet, 6 feet. So I think easing back into the way how we used to be before the pandemic would definitely be a way the students can definitely get those dilemmas that they may be having under control.
No, that's great. And Eileen, did you want to add to that?
Well, I think, I think if there's one thing I've learned from the past years, the amount of newness and novelty there is all over the place and all over around us. And I think one of the beautiful things about sort of the framework for insights is that there's a nice solid framework for how to approach dilemmas. It doesn't really matter what the dilemma is. And so, there's a good grounding and in the wonderful stop, think it out and, think and plan and try it out. I think it'll give students and educators a forum for thinking about what the dilemmas are as they're identified by students, and then thinking how to brainstorm together when there not necessarily may not be a great answer. And I think there's comfort in children being able to sort of create that when so many things are out of their control. Here they have a way to think together as a team and individually and contribute their ideas, and then having somebody to help reframe those and bolster and emphasize the ones that might be really good ways to solve a dilemma.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thinking about that as that structured opportunity or kind of that space to work that out. So I want to shift gears just slightly and sort of thinking about the flip side of this challenge, right, that we're facing in schools as we're thinking about this transition back, hopefully to in-person, full-time. And that's to maybe to invite some of the teachers. I don't know, maybe if Maria, you want to comment on this, or Phil, if you have any thoughts about this. But this idea of like, what are you as teachers see as your biggest challenge? So like you personally, like what are you maybe sort of dreading or worrying about? And because we focus a lot on the students, which I think is absolutely important. But in my opinion, equally important is the teachers and the adults who are responsible. And so what are you thinking about as maybe some of the things that you need to plan for or anticipate, again, around sort of students' social emotional learning needs, and maybe some of the more behavior kinds of issues in the classroom? So I don't know, Maria or Phil, whoever would like to maybe jump in.
I can go ahead and say that I'm very concerned about their anxiety levels and working through the problems that they might have or perceive going into a situation where there's a lot of stimulus again and a lot of people, person-to-person interaction that they haven't had for a year other than through the screen. I watched the video, and I do think that Insights gives a lot of opportunities to empower the children to articulate and communicate their concerns, and a framework that they can do a lot of problem solving together.
Oh, that's great. No, I think those are, two really important things for that anxiety, and then just literally the stimulation, right? Sort of how young children sort of handle that and how you help them with that. Phil, maybe before you say something, Sandy, do you want to say a little bit sort of about the program and sort of how it might be utilized for those kinds of scenarios, and thinking through that for how a teacher might tackle those challenges in the classroom?
Well, I think one of the strengths of Insights, and certainly we didn't plan this when we planned it 20 years ago, but one of the strengths is that there is a teacher and a parent program also, because it isn't just the kids who've had to go through this. Of course, their parents have too. And so the opportunity for teachers and parents to learn about children's different personalities and different strategies to use. And I know one of the comforts that we always see is finding out it's not just my kid. Other parents are struggling with this, or other teachers. Classroom management has always been a challenge for teachers. And now under these circumstances, it's going to be even a larger challenge, especially when teachers are dealing with their own transition back into the classroom.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Okay, so I think we're gonna hold off on Phil going, because I think her video might be frozen. So we're gonna move on. So Eileen or Sandy, maybe one of you could talk a little bit more about, like, I'm thinking about sort of like how would you specifically use the puppets, right? So like, because, with this remote learning, obviously the tangible kind of interactive aspects of the puppets and having them in the classroom. So maybe talking through a little bit more about how the puppets themselves, which is the part of Insights that I've always loved, and what I think makes it really special, sort of really how those can be leveraged, especially with these young children, sort of developmentally. Tell us a little bit more about that aspect of the puppets.
Eileen, why don't you go first?
Well, I think when I think of the puppets, and Sandy, you're very engaging and look lovely today, but I'm drawn to the puppets in your background, right? They're engaging, they're fun, they're non-threatening. And I think what's one of the things sort of I love beyond what they look is just the range of personalities and perspectives and moods and all sorts of dispositions that they have, that I think all children can identify with at least one of them, and sometimes more than one. So I think there's the engaging with the puppets as sort of a medium to be able to work through sometimes things that can be threatening and scary. I mean, talking about dilemmas and thinking about how to solve them is can be scary for some children, and having the puppets to sort of help them along, I think makes it an easier process. And we know the power of play, particularly in early childhood, how that's a really good mechanism for all sorts of learning.
The puppets are intended to increase children's empathy skills. So they not only learn that the puppets are all different from each other, and they have temperaments that I've identified in my research, but the kids learn very quickly that's what's easy for one puppet may be more challenging for another, and vice versa. And therefore, when they're dealing with their friends, learning how to treat a Coretta the cautious, a shy child in the classroom, as a friend might be different than the way you handle Gregory the grumpy. And yet they're all unique. They all have strengths. We emphasize that a whole lot. So I think that gives all the kids a chance to self-identify, but also to understand that everybody's not made up the same way as I am inside. And we all tend to think that way until we learn otherwise.
So yeah, such a powerful aspect of the puppets, and so critical of that age, right, for that developmental age group. So all right, so I think unfortunately Phil's video is still not working, so I'm gonna switch gears slightly, and I would like, Sandy, I think this is for you or Eileen, but I guess maybe I will start with let's see if Maria is still here, or Sandy G. Like sort of Insights has a sort of a parent program as well, right? There are materials for parents. things for parents to use are, oh, Phil's back, which is great. Okay, so Bill, I'm going to finish this question. So what kinds of things in terms of how you're working with parents around the transition back to school are you sort of anticipating or planning for or thinking about? And then, you know, sort of Sandy or Eileen, sort of how might Insights sort of facilitate that aspect of the transition back? So I don't know if Maria or Phil or Sandy, if one of you wants to talk about sort of the parents and all of this. Sandy, do you want to go ahead, Sandy G?
Well, I was going to say, I would like to hear what Maria is saying because she's actually in the classroom and will be dealing with parents. I have thoughts about the issue, but she could speak to that.
Cool, great, thank you.
I think it's going to be a time of rebuilding the relationships that we maybe once had with parents as they bring their children back to school, just starting before the doors even open. And communicating, letting them communicate what their thoughts are and their fears are so that those can be addressed right from the get-go.
Yeah, such a good point. Sandy, do you want to build on that?
Sure. You know, Sandy mentioned the parent and teacher programs that go along with the child program. And I think the return to school, I think the parents would benefit so much from the parent program because they're stressed. And a lot of parents are nervous and uncertain about their children's safety when they go back into the building. And, you know, when parents are stressed, they feel that stress too. So I think those components together, the child program and the teacher, but really including the parents, might help ease that transition for the parents and the kids.
Thank you. So we are nearing kind of getting to the end of our Q&A session, and I would be very remiss in my role as a program officer at IES if I didn't ask a very specific question about the research behind this program. And so, Sandy, I was wondering if there's a lot I would be happy to brag about, and I could point out all sorts of papers and cool things. But like, what do you feel like is the most important thing that the research is showing about Insights and how it can really support students?
I think the consistent thing is, yes, we do get academic outcomes. And since this is the Institute of Education Sciences, I think I should mention that. But we also get a lot of behavioral outcomes for the kids. When comparing the kids to the control group, the Insights kids' behavior problems went down in the classroom as opposed to those that went up in the control schools. Also, kids at home, the same kind of thing, even helping parents deal with kids who would be identified in other programs with ADHD, but are not in Insights. We have a much more gentle approach. And so I think I'm very proud of the behavioral ones, and not only disruptive behavior, but for the children who are shy. Those are the kids we're really concerned about too, particularly going back in school, giving them the resources and their teachers and parents to deal with them.
Thank you, Sandy. No, that's great. So I want to thank everyone so much for participating today, even with our technical glitches. Thank you to our teachers, our facilitators, everyone who's taken part. And we are going to wrap this up now. Thank you again.